Just crack him and he would just fire back at you, and he knocked a lot of people out just because he could take a shot so well.
Back when Chuck Liddell dominated the octagon, he looked absolutely invincible. But that dominance came at a brutal price. Chuck's entire fighting philosophy was built around eating shots and banking on his iron chin lasting forever.
He shouldn't be fighting. He shouldn't be fighting. At 50, he clearly can't take a punch anymore.
When people finally started pleading with him to walk away, you could already see the toll it had taken.
Somebody was picking on you, bullying you, maybe even hitting you, and you stood there with your hands by your side, your fist balled up, your hands by your side, and the daycare teacher was like, "Why are you not fighting back?"
Well, my mom told me I wasn't allowed to fight. I wasn't allowed to hit anybody, so, I wouldn't do it. I mean, as my mom said I can't, so I guess I'll just sit here and take it. But and it happened a few times, and he finally called my mom and talked to her and said, "You got to let him defend himself. We can't be there every time something's happening." And he's just letting him. And I was like, okay, So she took me to my grandfather and had him teach me some straight punches and started throwing punches. And as far as defending myself, the rest is history.
Nobody was surprised when news emerged about Chuck potentially suffering from traumatic brain injuries. It was the inevitable conclusion to a career where his own approach made this outcome practically guaranteed. Here's how one of MMA's most terrifying champions went beyond his breaking point and what it cost him. The legend of the Iceman begins here. Born December 17, 1969, in Santa Barbara, California, Charles David Liddell grew up in a household run by his single mother and grandparents. Those early boxing lessons from his grandfather planted the first seeds of what would become a legendary combat career.
It was Koikan Karate Do was my first style. I was black belt. I won our nationals for our style.
When Chuck turned 12, he dove into Koikan karate training. This martial art became so important to him that he eventually had Koikan tattooed right on his scalp, as permanent recognition of where it all started.
People probably don't have any idea that you have a business degree.
I want to get a PE degree, but my grandma didn't believe that was a real major. So I had to pick a major when I was a freshman. I picked accounting. I was good at it.
Outside of organized sports, however, he developed a reputation for toughness in a different way. Liddell often found himself involved in street fights, where his size, strength, and early martial arts training set him apart from his peers.
I used to even say in high school, I used to say, man, it sucks. Well, the thing I'm really good at, I can't make money doing. And I was talking about street fighting. I was going to Cal Poly at the time. I was like 19, I think. One of the resident wrestling practices goes to me, by any chance, did you jump off a car and kick a guy in the head? Yeah. How do you know?
Did you lose any fights in high school? Was there anybody you fought that somebody caught you? Or did you ever none? So you don't remember ever?
Chuck's natural athletic ability earned him a spot at California Polytechnic State University. As a Division I wrestler, he walked away in 1995 with his bachelor's degree in business accounting. Interestingly, his grandmother had steered him away from physical education because she didn't consider it a legitimate degree.
I got called into an old karate school. And they called me in because they had a black belt coming in to spar. I came in and it was John.
So I get there and the guy goes, "Oh yeah, well, I can't really fight you, so you're going to go with one of my students." There it was Chuck. And I was like, okay, all right, I'm going to go. I gave my card before I left and just said, if you ever really want to learn, the sport part of it or whatever, and give me a call. And
so I called him up and I'm like, I'm like, hey, he's like, yeah, come on up. Let's go. Let's train.
Chuck dominated amateur kickboxing with an incredible 20 record and 16 knockouts. He claimed 2 national amateur kickboxing titles during this period. This is also when he crossed paths with John Hackelman, an experienced kickboxer who ran the Pit Gym in San Luis Obispo.
How did you get your nickname?
My trainer, John Hackelman, gave it to me. I think it was like my 3rd or 4th kickboxing fight. He came looking for me, couldn't find me. He finally found me. I was sleeping. He's like, "You don't get nervous before every fight?" No. They started calling me Iceman because I don't get nervous before fights.
He was the Iceman. I've never seen him lose his cool.
Despite his success, the sport offered little financial security at the time, and he often struggled to make ends meet.
I was having a lot of fun, but I wasn't making any money. And the UFC had come along during that time, but no one knew how to get into it.
During this period, he even considered leaving combat sports altogether to find a steady job that could support him long term.
So I was close to going back and getting a real job. I graduated in accounting right around 97.
Hackelman transformed Chuck's career trajectory completely. He took Chuck's natural knockout power and shaped it into the relentless striking system that would eventually make him UFC royalty. Hackelman was also responsible for giving Chuck his legendary nickname.
When did you meet Dana White? When did that connection happen?
Dana was actually managing, I think, Tito. And Wayne Harriman, who's friends with Tito and Dana, was a friend of mine and would see me train with Tito. And he actually told Dana, you might want to sign this guy. He might be better than Tito. So Dana signed me then. He was my manager. He was managing me and Tito.
Simultaneously?
Yeah.
Well, before the UFC, I managed both Chuck and Tito. So, I did have a relationship with both guys.
It was awesome. I traveled around for a long time trying to promote the sport. I did a lot of things trying to just get the sport out there.
Chuck stepped into professional mixed martial arts on UFC 17 in Mobile, Alabama, back in 1998. His first opponent, Noe Hernandez, fell to him by unanimous decision. Before reaching the major leagues, Chuck formed a crucial connection with Dana White, who was managing fighters at that time.
I'm telling you, when Chuck Liddell was in his prime, he was one of the most terrifying fucking human beings that's ever walked the face of the earth.
Chuck hit his first major roadblock early in his UFC journey. At UFC 19 in 1999, Jeremy Horn caught him in an arm triangle choke for a technical submission victory. This would stand as the only time Chuck ever lost by submission in his entire career. He bounced back hard with a string of devastating wins. From 2000 through 2002, he destroyed a murderer's row of opponents, including Paul Jones, Kevin Randleman, Murillo Bustamante, and Vitor Belfort. May 27, 2001 saw him travel to Japan, where he knocked out Guy Mezger in round 2 at Pro. Chuck became the very first UFC athlete to step into that Japanese organization.
It was in Tito's head big time because every time they trained together, Tito would get beat up. I'm talking drop him on the ground and Tito refusing to get back up. Chuck would want to hook up and spar and whatever, and Tito would never want to spar.
When we trained together, I took him down way more than he took me down.
No way.
But that's why he didn't want to fight me, because he couldn't out wrestle me. And then when we're striking, I used to drop him with body shots, and he never dropped me.
He never dropped you?
No, never.
Absolutely, positively would not fight Chuck because he knew he couldn't beat Chuck.
There was just one problem, though. Tito Ortiz held the championship and absolutely refused to fight Chuck. They had trained together, and Tito knew exactly what kind of damage Chuck could inflict.
The other event got fucking huge, and then Chuck Liddell came onto the scene.
Yes.
And when Chuck Liddell was the champion, Chuck Liddell was so fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
He was this do or die berserker. He would just come at you, just swinging bombs, take one on the chin, knock dudes out. His fights were wild.
He didn't give a shit.
He was the real reason why the UFC became uber popular, because you would watch The Ultimate Fighter and it was a wild fight, a great fight, but then you need a destroyer.
Right.
You need a destroyer, and that
Yeah.
destroyer was Chuck Liddell. And
Okay.
for the run where he was at the top, where Chuck Liddell was just murking people.
So he was kind of like the Mike.
So the UFC created an interim light heavyweight championship and put Chuck against Randy Couture at UFC 43 in 2003. Couture figured out how to neutralize Chuck's signature looping hooks by using straight punches and clinch work. Couture controlled the takedowns and finished Chuck by TKO. That same year, Chuck entered Pride's 2003 Middleweight Grand Prix. He destroyed Alistair Overeem in the first round, but Quentin Rampage Jackson stopped him via second-round TKO in the semifinals. Once Ortiz finally resolved his contract issues with the UFC, he lost his belt to Randy Couture. This opened the door for Chuck versus Ortiz at UFC 47 in April 2004. Chuck absolutely lived up to every bit of anticipation. He knocked Ortiz unconscious in the second round. Early 2005 brought Chuck onto the first season of The Ultimate Fighter as a coach opposite Randy Couture. The show became a massive hit. Then April 16, 2005 arrived. UFC 52, Chuck knocked out Couture in round 1 to capture the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship. Everything changed after that moment.
His fights when he knocked out Tito Ortiz, like, oh my God, he was a monster.
Right.
He was a monster.
I knew Chuck Liddell was going to win those fights. I knew he was. He had Tito's number. Tito couldn't deal with Chuck's style, his power, his wrestling. Tito couldn't take Chuck down, and Chuck was 1,000,000% in Tito's head.
It was Liddell's fourth consecutive title defense, and it emphatically reaffirmed his dominance over his rival.
By the end of Michael Jordan took basketball to new heights. Chuck did the same thing for this sport. Between 2005 and 2007, Chuck successfully defended his title 4 separate times. He beat Jeremy Horn, Randy Couture in their trilogy fight, Renato Sobral, and Tito Ortiz in the rematch. That second Ortiz fight at UFC 66 shattered every previous UFC financial record. Chuck even fought with a torn MCL, but still managed to stop Ortiz in round 3.
Rampage wasted little time in the rematch. He caught Liddell with a right hook in the first round, dropping him, and followed up with ground strikes to score a knockout just 1 minute 53 seconds into the fight. In a flash, Chuck Liddell's reign as champion was over.
Good left hook to the bottom.
It was a stunning defeat, the first knockout loss of Liddell's UFC career, and it marked a turning point.
Chuck, you've been the most dominant light heavyweight champion in the history of the UFC.
By 2006, Chuck had basically run through every top contender in the division. He was the undisputed face of the entire UFC brand. That mohawk, those skull tattoos, and his knockout celebrations became absolutely iconic. He put together 7 straight knockout victories, a UFC record that still stands today. Then everything started falling apart. Every legendary champion eventually meets their match. Chuck's day of reckoning arrived in 2000. He defended his championship against Quinton Rampage Jackson, the same fighter who had beaten him in Japan 4 years before. This time, though, the UFC title was up for grabs.
When Chuck was young, he was known for having like a granite chin. You could just crack him and he would just fire back at you, and he knocked a lot of people out just because he could take a shot so well. And then one day, it just stopped working.
Stories came out about Chuck hitting nightclubs during fight week. People criticized his preparation and focus. Chuck insisted this was normal for his Vegas fights, but questions about his lifestyle started gaining serious traction. Just 4 months later, Chuck was back in there against Keith Jardine. Most people thought he hadn't given himself enough time to recover properly. Jardine's weird style and leg kicks earned him a split decision victory. Chuck had now lost 2 fights in a row.
Yeah, and then the knockouts came, like Rampage KO'd him, and then other people were KOing him, and then it just got to a point where it's just like one good punch and you would just go out. It's like your brain knows you're so tough, and it's like, hey, we got to protect this guy. He's stupid. He's going to keep getting hit, so let's just shut off.
December 2007 brought Chuck face-to-face with Wanderlei Silva at UFC 79. Both guys were known for their knockout power and aggressive approaches. They delivered exactly what everyone expected. 3 incredible rounds of back-and-forth action. Chuck took a unanimous decision victory. That fight earned 207 Fight of the Year honors. Unfortunately, it would also be the last time Chuck ever won an MMA fight.
Yeah. When I got to the weigh-in and we did the face-off, for me, I was like, oh, man, Chuck looks serious, because I watched him so many times. That's when I really started to think man, I'm fighting Chuck Liddell. So that's when, for me, the nerve started. And then I hit up Randy Couture, who just happened to be a floor below me, and I go and see Randy, and I'm like, oh, man, Randy, I'm scared, man. I'm scared. And Randy's like, what's going on? He's like, oh, man, I just can't shake this feeling, man. I'm just so nervous about tomorrow, and I don't want to get beat up and knocked out in front of everybody. And the best advice I ever got, he said, you got to make friends with the worst enemy. When you make friends with the worst enemy, you understand that life will go on. And then I worked myself up into a lather just thinking about it, yeah, I got to face my fears. I got to face my worst enemy.
2008 marked the beginning of the end for the Iceman. Years of absorbing punishment were finally catching up to him. September 6, 2008, Chuck stepped in against Rashad Evans at UFC.
It was crazy.
And he didn't get up.
It was such a flush shot.
The brutal loss was a sobering moment, and many observers thought it might be the end of the road for Chuck.
Because his style was so aggressive, that people could just set, boom, and counter, like Rashad Evans did with him. And so you're getting his momentum coming forward and the shot, and he would get flatlined.
Round 2 brought one of the most shocking knockouts in UFC history. A single overhand right from Evans put Chuck out completely.
I care about him. I care about his health. And it's over, man. We all turned 40. It's over. Listen, I've been pushing for retirement. He's my friend. I love him. I care about him. We sat down. We had a 2-hour talk. He wanted to do this. He fucking has nothing to prove. Nothing to prove. He doesn't have to prove anything to me, the rest of the world. He's got shitloads of money. There's no reason for it.
Chuck came back in April 2009 to face Mauricio Shogun Rua at UFC 97. Shogun finished Chuck with a TKO in the opening round. After this defeat, UFC President Dana White started publicly questioning whether Chuck should hang up his gloves.
Chuck told me before the season started, when I asked him to do it, he said, I guarantee you, Tito will not fight me. We'll do this show and he'll pull out of the fight. I guarantee it. And that's why when Tito pulled out, I was like, holy shit. Chuck was right. And, I had to go tell Chuck that Tito pulled out. Tito pulled out of the fight.
That fucking pussy. Don't let that guy fight anymore, man. He's a fucking pussy.
They settled on one last fight. The plan was Tito Ortiz after the two coached against each other on season 11 of The Ultimate Fighter. But Ortiz backed out with an injury.
Chuck Liddell came in. He worked hard for this thing. And, I think him and Rich Franklin tonight fought the type of fights that made them both famous and made them both world champions tonight. Those two went at it. He means a lot to this company, and he means a lot to the sport. He means a lot to me personally. He was a great champion. He was a great business partner. He's always going to have a home with the UFC. He gave it his last shot. You know what? He went out like Chuck Liddell would. Came out blasting, bombing, tried to put Rich away in the slugfest. And he gave the fans a good last fight with the Iceman.
Chuck's final UFC moment came against Rich Franklin at UFC 11-15 in June 20. He got knocked out at the very end of round 1. 3 straight knockout losses to end his career.
People asked me for a long time why I stuck around so long. Like, if I was getting my ass kicked and then getting knocked out, it would have been a lot easier to hang it up. I was getting paid really well, and I was winning fights and then just getting caught. So you always think, oh man, I can fix that. We had a dinner together. I said, look, man, I can't figure out why this happened. I can't compete the way I used to. So, I'm done.
And I'm here today with my partner, Lorenzo Fertitta, to announce his retirement. Myself, my partners owe a lot to Chuck Liddell. And we're also here today to announce that he is becoming one of the top executives in the UFC. Chuck Liddell is now the new executive vice president of business development.
July 10th, 2009. Chuck entered the UFC Hall of Fame Pioneer Wing. December 29th, 2010, he made it official at the UFC 25 press conference and announced his retirement. The UFC created a vice president of business development position for him. They promised it would last for life.
And Chuck Liddell and Tito are fighting, so what else you got?
Ooh, what do you think of that?
Not my cup of tea, but,
You're going to watch it?
For sure. Well,
I'm going to watch it.
Yeah, we'll watch it. We might do a fight companion for it.
There's some people say it shouldn't happen, right?
Oh no, I don't think it shouldn't happen. I look at it more like I think if Chuck Liddell was still employee of the UFC, getting paid $400,000 just to chill or whatever he was doing for the UFC, he would not be fighting. I think it's more of a money play, which bums me out because I think Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz, what they did for the sport, should be compensated for the rest of their lives. It bums me out they have to fight to make money. That bums me out.
2016 changed everything when the UFC sold to new ownership for $4 billion. The company completely restructured their operations. Chuck, along with fellow Hall of Famer Matt Hughes, got released from his executive role. So much for that lifetime guarantee. 2018 brought a shocking announcement. Chuck, now 48 years old, was coming out of retirement. He wanted a third fight with Tito Ortiz. This time it wouldn't be in the UFC, but under Oscar De La Hoya's Golden Boy Promotions.
Can't be fighting. He shouldn't be fighting. At 50, he clearly can't take a punch anymore.
Dana White went ballistic over this fight. He called the California State Athletic Commission's approval absolutely disgusting. White reminded everyone that he had retired Chuck in 2010 specifically to protect his long-term health.
He just felt like he always had Tito's number. But this is the problem, is like Tito wins now. When it all said and done, Tito KO'd him. And he KO'd him more soundly than Chuck ever KO'd Tito. Yeah. Tito put Chuck out. He put him out. You're dealing with a guy whose brains are, it's just, he's been scrambled too many times.
He didn't immediately make a retirement speech in the cage, but the consensus in the MMA community was that this would be the end. And in March 2020, Chuck Liddell confirmed he had retired from MMA competition again, this time for good.
November 24th, 2018, Chuck and Ortiz met for the final time at the Forum in Inglewood, California. It ended quickly and badly. Ortiz knocked Chuck out with punches at 4:24 of the first round. Chuck's 7th career knockout loss and 4th consecutive dating back to 2.
He has been saying that he misses it. It was his favorite thing.
Yeah, I miss playing baseball.
He misses it.
To me, it's more of a sad story.
See, I think Tito, he might actually want this fight just to fight Chuck again.
On November 24th, 2018, Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz stepped into the cage one last time.
The California State Athletic Commission hit Chuck with an indefinite medical suspension. This basically banned him from competing anywhere in the United States. The Guardian called it a disgusting spectacle. Critics argued it was completely unnecessary. to expose Chuck to additional brain trauma.
All done the right way at the right time.
I don't have any regrets. You know, I had a great time. I mean, it was fun. I got paid a lot of money to do what I love for a living, and my body held together pretty dang well.
March 2020. Chuck confirmed he was done with MMA competition permanently, but the real consequences were just beginning. The damage Chuck accumulated during his fighting career didn't disappear when he stopped competing. Those years of brutal exchanges followed him into retirement. October 11, 2021. Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies got called to Chuck's Hidden Hills home for a domestic disturbance. A verbal argument between Chuck and his wife Heidi Northcott had turned physical with pushing. Their daughter saw the whole thing but couldn't tell who started it. Chuck had a small red mark on his cheek and another mark near his chest. Heidi showed no visible injuries. Chuck got arrested on misdemeanor domestic battery charges. They booked him at the Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff's Station and released him on 20th. Within hours of getting out, Chuck posted on Instagram, "I was the victim of the incident last night at our family home, as details of the case will reveal. Deputies informed me that my wife would be arrested as I did not respond to her assault while I sustained bruising and lacerations. I volunteered to go in her place. This was one of many times I have tried to shield a family mental health issue from public eye out of love and loyalty to her, but now it's apparent that is impossible. It's time for this relationship to end." October 18th, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office dropped all charges against both parties. They said there wasn't enough evidence. The case got labeled as a cross-complaint since both people accused the other of being the aggressor. 4 days after the incident, Chuck filed for divorce. They had been together since around 2009 and had 2 kids. These legal proceedings dragged on for almost 4 years. September 2022 brought disturbing revelations from court documents in the custody evaluation. Heidi Northcott made shocking claims about Chuck's condition. She alleged Chuck was showing signs of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the brain disease linked to repeated head trauma. Court filings reported by The Blast quoted her saying, "He's been knocked out many times and has CT. He can't remember stuff and gets stuck on speech. He's going to have dementia or Alzheimer's. He has terrible sleep apnea." Northcott made additional mental health allegations. She described depression, paranoia, impulsiveness, and using drugs and alcohol to escape reality. She claimed his behavior was becoming more unpredictable and violent. You can't definitively diagnose CTE without examining the brain after death, but Chuck's career provided plenty of reasons for concern. 7 knockout losses in his career, 4 of them consecutive in his final 5 fights. His aggressive style meant eating heavy shots to land his own. Years of hard sparring sessions added to the damage. Concerns about Chuck's brain health actually started way before the 2022 allegations. As early as 2012, reporters noticed slurred speech and trouble finding words during interviews. A 2007 Good Morning Texas appearance showed him looking drowsy, slurring words, and literally falling asleep on camera. The Nevada State Athletic Commission made him take a drug test before approving his next fight. He passed. Years later, Chuck explained he had been sick, partied the night before, and taken a huge dose of Ambien. The effects lasted way longer than expected. He couldn't even remember traveling from Texas to California. The custody evaluation recommended Chuck and his ex-wife share joint custody of their children. The court required random drug testing for both parents. The divorce became final in April 2025. The terms included joint legal and physical custody. Chuck agreed to $5,000 monthly child support, a $700,000 education fund, and covering medical expenses, plus extracurriculars. Chuck's attorney Juliana Loyola stated, "After quashing numerous false allegations against Chuck, the parties reached a divorce settlement outside of court. Chuck is a great father. He is always and will continue to put his children first." October 2025, Chuck got remarried. He wed Heidi Ray in Las Vegas. Chuck has been taking action regarding his brain health concerns. In 2024, he traveled to BioAccelerator in Colombia for stem cell treatments designed to reduce joint inflammation, prevent CTE development, and promote longevity. This facility runs clinical trials, specifically for concussion syndrome and CTE. Chuck's situation isn't unique. It highlights major problems throughout MMA. Unlike the NFL or boxing, MMA has no fighters union or pension system. Retired fighters often deal with physical and financial struggles without union-backed healthcare or retirement benefits. Many resort to crowdfunding or completely unrelated jobs. The Guardian highlighted the struggles of former fighters and the lack of protection against exploitative comebacks motivated by financial desperation. Chuck also got scammed in a 2007 real estate. He invested in properties with developer Kelly Gerhardt, who later pled guilty to wire fraud and money laundering. The escrow officer improperly released Chuck's funds and allegedly forged signatures. The properties never actually transferred. Chuck won almost $2 million in damages. Despite all of this, Chuck's legacy as a pioneer remains intact. He stays active through podcasts, promotional events, and UFC appearances. In 2025 interviews, he praised modern fighters like Alex Pereira as legitimate warriors. His story works as both inspiration and cautionary tale. Chuck helped transform MMA from underground spectacle into worldwide phenomenon. He brought millions of fans to events and motivated an entire generation of fighters. But his aggressive, chin-first style carried serious long-term consequences. As of 2026 at age 56, Chuck continues dealing with health challenges. His ex-wife's CTE allegations remain unproven, but they match patterns seen in other combat sports athletes. Memory problems, speech issues, sleep apnea, mood swings. The real question is whether his body held up as well as he thinks it did, and more importantly, whether his brain did too. That wraps up this story. For more compelling content like this, check out the suggestions on your screen.